The dreaming spires of Oxford, and among them, a rookery. There's a jackdaw on a chimney pot. And here's my suburban back garden. It's not exactly a game reserve, but it's a pretty good hunting ground for the naturalist. There's the hedgehog, and scurrying into my pond, a newt. Now, what else have we got here? Ah, the long-tailed tits are back. And there she is again. Lovely. The kestrel. After the sparrows, I should think. Fantastic bird. Hello there. My name's Malcolm Coe, and I'm an ecologist here in Oxford, sitting in my garden, enjoying the wildlife. And to do it, I don't even have to move from my chair. You know, I've spent most of my life in some of the wildest places in the world. On safari in Africa, watching elephants, rhino, and lions. But I never cease to be amazed whenever I get back home, just how much wildlife there is here in a perfectly ordinary garden. This seems to surprise so many people because they fondly imagine that wildlife only occurs in wild places and that any animals that we do find in town are nothing more than a ragged bunch of scavengers that are raking around in our dustbins. What this city safari is going to show us is that this just isn't true. Now, what interests me is how it is that all these animals manage to survive so far from the countryside. Well, a big part of that answer is right down here at my feet. You'll see, it's these green plants, the green material of the grass in my lawn, which provides the basis for an ecosystem in the town, just as it does in the countryside, or indeed, for that matter, absolutely anywhere else in the world. It's like a miniature jungle down there. There are spittlebugs sucking juice from the grass and many other insects up in the green canopy. Woodlice and beetles scurry among the roots. And there are even predators like the wolf spider hunting insects. This is all natural food for wildlife in towns. Starlings don't just come to my lawn for bread. They're after insects as well. In fact, it's only because you've got plenty of insect food in towns that birds like long-tailed tits can survive there. They feed their young entirely on grubs and build a lovely domed nest with cobwebs and feathers. Here's one removing the chick's droppings. These birds aren't nesting in my garden, but since the air in our cities has become cleaner, they've become quite common in towns, even in the centre of London. All the wild creatures that you've seen in my garden can, in fact, be found somewhere in the capital. It's a mistake many people make to believe that the only wildlife in London is locked up in Regent's Park Zoo. There is a lot of wildlife here, but I don't mean the lions. Living among the captive animals are truly wild creatures, like this little bird, the moorhen. Every year, a pair of moorhens nest here in the lion enclosure, unconcerned about visitors to the zoo or the king of the beasts. Now, moorhens need insect food to provide their chicks with a rich protein diet, and they find plenty on the lion's pool. They do scavenge to feed themselves, but without natural food, it's unlikely they'd breed successfully here. And look at this. The moorhen has caught a fish. This may not impress the lions, but it's an amazing example of how truly wild birds can find a hunting ground in a city. Mallard chicks, too, need insect food and search for it within a few feet of the lions. In fact, the lion's pool is valuable territory for these wild birds. The mallard and the moorhens will actually fight over it. There's a lot more wildlife here, living among the captive zoo animals. Now, the grey squirrel, which lives and breeds wild in the zoo, does do a lot of scavenging. So too does the magpie. But the behaviour of these creatures is little different from their country cousins. Here, the magpie's collecting and hoarding peanuts. The grey squirrel does the same. But watch this amazing bit of behaviour. The magpie watches the squirrel and waits for it to finish burying the peanuts. Then it hops down to steal the squirrel's hoard. Though the food these creatures are competing for is a handout from man, their behaviour is wild. And in fact, magpies and squirrels need a great range of food and nesting material to survive here. You've also got wild grey herons coming in to steal fish from the sea lions in the zoo. Now, the herons are taking a natural food provided by man. But they couldn't survive here just by scavenging. The birds that nest in the heronry close to the zoo are reliant on all the trees, green plants and fresh water of Regent's Park. It's a great example of a really exotic bird exploiting the green islands of the city. London's lakes, like the Serpentine in Hyde Park, are rich in insect food. This attracts birds, which have made their own way over here from Africa. Here's a swallow, just arrived after a 6,000-mile journey in which it's crossed the Sahara Desert. Many such birds stop to feed in Hyde Park on their summer migration. There are house martins here too, and they actually stay to nest near to the park in Knightsbridge. It's a lovely sight as these migrant birds from Africa find the mud for their nests near a cafe at the end of the lake. When they've scooped the mud up with their beaks, they fly upmarket to the French embassy. Here they mold the mud into their nests, which are tucked into the stucco rosettes under the eaves. Every town has one or other of these summer visitors. Here in Oxford, we have swifts, which arrive every year from Africa to nest in the tower of our university museum. And it takes these little birds a bit longer than it takes me to get back here these days. And yet, they make it entirely to feed on insects, though they use a man-made structure to nest in. Now, I think I've proved that wildlife in town isn't just scavenging for food, because birds like swifts feed on the natural products of our parks and gardens and the lakes of our cities. But of course, there is another kind of ecosystem in the city based on all the muck and rubbish that we throw away. And it's interesting to ask which species can survive almost entirely without green plants. The ordinary town pigeon has a special ability among birds. Both male and female can make from junk food like bread a white gooey substance called pigeon's milk. This provides the young with the rich protein food they need, and one of the secrets of the pigeon's success in town is that it's not reliant on insect food. House sparrows also scavenge, of course, but like other birds, they do try to feed their young insect food, which they pick from the trees. Whatever sparrows are feeding on, they're always in danger of becoming a natural meal for this bird. At the top of the food chain in town is the kestrel. It'll hunt sparrows even in the center of the city. House sparrows make up a big part of the kestrel's diet here and in suburbia. So you've got sparrows which eat popcorn, becoming a protein meal for the kestrel. There are so many surprising ways in which our cities, even industrial Sheffield, can provide conditions on which wildlife will thrive. This may look like the countryside, but it is in fact an overgrown sewage works.
wonderful entrance. Marvellous, isn't it?
For ecologist Keith Clarkson, who knows the site well, it's a great place for a safari. With him is botanist Oliver Gilbert.
Well, this is the start of the site. I'll have a quick look at the birds that are around and perhaps if you fancy looking at some of the plants.
And I'll see what I can find in the plant line.
And how about
shall we meet up somewhere over here in an hour or so?
That sounds a great idea, yeah.
Compare notes?
Excellent. Yeah, smash it.
All right.
See you later. This works is mostly disused now, but you still get some raw sewage sludge dumped here, and that's one of the great attractions for the wildlife. It smells pretty bad, but let's take a look into the warm, moist interior. It's quite incredible what you can find. There are all kinds of larvae. Here's a blowfly emerging from its pupae. It's a world in miniature with its own special beauty. But above all, the little mites and flies and maggots are a rich food source for other creatures. Here's a young pied wagtail finding plenty to eat on the sludge. There's a magpie, which has also got something. You can see lots of grey wagtails here too. And here's a young starling. Large flocks of these birds feed on the sludge. Much of the site is now overgrown, and there's a whole range of habitats. The River Don flows through, which is great for martins and swifts. The floodwaters are diverted onto the sludge, where they form shallow lagoons. Here you see migrant birds like the common sandpiper. Others actually nest here. There's always a pair or two of little ring plover, which are rare in England. And there's a dabchick, or little grebe, feeding its young on fish caught in a lagoon. There's probably a greater range of habitat here than in many rural areas, and I'm sure Oliver will have stumbled across some unusual plants.
This is really astonishing. A mass of biting stonecrop in full flower. The soil here is extremely shallow, and it's growing actually over the concrete floor of a sludge tank. And there's only about a centimetre of soil, and it's an extremely drought-resistant plant. And it's one of the few plants which can grow in such a dry habitat. And it got here, found the conditions to its liking, and have just taken over. The natural habitat of biting stonecrop is limestone cliffs. It's just one example of the wide range of soil types and plant communities on the site. There's a bullfinch eating the seeds of rosebay willow herb. This is the bank of an old lagoon, now well colonised by flowers. This one's red campion. All these plant communities have grown up in the past 20 years. There's no mature woodland, but the site's got almost everything else.
Hi. Well then, Oliver.
Hi.
Have you had a successful time?
Yes, I have.
So,
And you?
not bad at all, thanks, yeah. Amazing variety of things, really. It's fascinating just to look around and see such a marvellously complex and interwoven ecosystem that all hinges on human waste.
Yes.
Earlier on, we had kestrels flying over, which are actually feeding young in the factory behind us. On this side, they hunt voles that live in the long grass.
So here's the natural world on a man-made green island, humming with a great range of wildlife. And of course, the city's wildlife changes with the seasons as it does in the countryside. In late summer, the green plants wither and the insect food disappears. Swifts and martins flock before their return to Africa. But in winter, the town still has resources which will draw in migrants from the countryside. Look at this, a short-eared owl hunting voles on Rainham Marsh in East London. You'll find these magnificent birds of prey on the rough grasslands of many parts of our cities during the winter, and you can watch them because they fly during the day. These urban heathlands attract other birds of prey. This is perhaps a country kestrel wintering in town. But the greatest natural resource the city has in winter is its reservoirs of fresh water. This is Walthamstow in northeast London. It's bitterly cold, but here in town the water remains open when country lakes are frozen. So this is a refuge for wildfowl for miles around. Here's a party of widgeon flying in. They join other birds, coots, tufted duck and pochard, many of which breed in northern Europe but come south in winter. There are plenty of fish in the reservoirs, food for birds, like grey herons. There's a little dunlin feeding on shrimps. Large numbers of cormorant gather here. They nest on the coast, but in winter they come inland, and London has been invaded by these birds in recent years. They form great roosts on this island tree in Walthamstow. This amazing Siberian scene in a North London suburb shows how the city's natural resources will draw in a rich variety of wildlife in both summer and winter. And you can actually find birds here that have come from Siberia. A family of Buick's swans has arrived to a cold reception from a pair of mute swans. the Buicks have flown all the way to Walthamstow from their breeding grounds in Siberia.
Your copy of the pack, write to City Safari, Box 33, London SE1 9LT. That's City Safari, Box 33, London SE1 9LT.